there were no signs of an answer from Mr. Darch. Midwinter's patience was not proof against the delay. He left Allan dozing on the grass, and went to the house to make inquiries. The town was described as a little more than 2 miles distant, but the day of the week happened to be market day, and Richard was being detained, no doubt, by some of the many acquaintances whom he would be sure to meet with on that occasion. Half an hour later, the truant messenger returned, and was sent out to report himself to his master under the tree in the park. "Any answer from Mr. Darch?" asked Midwinter, seeing that Allan was too lazy to put the question for himself. "Mr. Darch was engaged, sir. I was desired to say that he would send an answer." "Any news in the town?" inquired Allan, drowsily, without troubling himself to open his eyes. "No, sir, nothing in particular." Observing the man suspiciously as he made that reply, Midwinter detected in his face that he was not speaking the truth. He was plainly embarrassed, and plainly relieved when his master's silence allowed him to withdraw. After a little consideration, Midwinter followed, and overtook the retreating servant on the drive before the house. "Richard," he said, quietly, "if I was to guess that there is some news in the town, and that you don't like telling it to your master, should I be guessing the truth?" The man started and changed color. "I don't know how you have found it out," he said, "but I can't deny you have guessed right. If you let me hear what the news is, I will take the responsibility on myself of telling Mr. Armadale." After some little hesitation, and some distrustful consideration on his side of Midwinter's face, Richard at last prevailed on himself to repeat what he had heard that day in the town. The news of Allan's sudden appearance at Thorpe Ambrose had preceded the servant's arrival at his destination by some hours. Wherever he went, he found his master the subject of public discussion. The opinion of Allan's conduct among the leading townspeople, the resident gentry of the neighborhood, and the principal tenants on the estate was unanimously unfavorable. Only the day before, the committee for managing the public reception of the new squire had sketched the progress of the procession, had settled the serious question of the triumphal arches, and had appointed a competent person to solicit subscriptions for the flags, the flowers, the feasting, the fireworks, and the band. In less than a week more of the money could have been collected, and the rector would have written to Mr. Armadale to fix the day. And now, by Allan's own act, the public welcome waiting to honor him had been cast back contemptuously in the public teeth. Everybody took for granted, and what was unfortunately true, that he had received private information of the contemplated proceedings. Everybody declared that he had purposely stolen into his own house like a thief in the night, so the phrase ran, to escape accepting the offered civilities of his neighbors. In brief, the sensitive self-importance of the little town was wounded to the quick, and of Allan's once enviable position in the estimation of the neighborhood not a vestige remained. For a moment, Midwinter faced the messenger of evil tidings in silent distress. That moment past, The sense of Allan's critical position roused him. Now the evil was known, to seek the remedy. "Has the little you have seen of your master, Richard, inclined you to like him?" This time the man answered without hesitation. A pleasanter and kinder gentleman than Mr. Armadale no one could wish to serve. "If you think that," pursued Midwinter, "you won't object to give me some information which will help your master to set himself right with his neighbors. Come into the house." He led the way into the library, and after asking the necessary questions, took down in writing a list of the names and addresses of the most influential persons living in the town and its neighborhood. This done, he rang the bell for the head footman, having previously sent Richard with a message to the stables, directing an open carriage to be ready in an hour's time. When the late Mr. Blanchard went out to make calls in the neighborhood, it was your place to go with him, was it not?" he asked, when the upper servant appeared. "Very well. Be ready in an hour's time, if you please, to go out with Mr. Armadale." Having given that order, he left the house again on his way back to Allan, with the visiting list in his hand. He smiled a little sadly as he descended the steps. "Who would have imagined," he thought, "that my footboy's experience of the ways of gentlefolks would be worth looking back at one day for Allan's sake?" The object of the popular odium lay innocently slumbering on the grass, with his garden hat over his nose, his waistcoat unbuttoned, and his trousers wrinkled halfway up his outstretched legs. Midwinter roused him without hesitation, and remorselessly repeated the servant's news. Allan accepted the disclosure thus forced on him without the slightest disturbance of temper. "Oh, hang them!" was all he said. "Let's have another cigar." Midwinter took the cigar out of his hand, and, insisting on his treating the matter seriously, told him in plain words that he must set himself right with his offended neighbors by calling on them personally to make his apologies. Allan sat up on the grass in astonishment. His eyes opened wide in incredulous dismay. Did Midwinter positively meditate forcing him into a chimney pot hat, a nicely brushed frock coat, and a clean pair of gloves? Was it actually in contemplation to shut him up in a carriage, with his footman on the box and his card case in his hand, and send him round from house to house, to tell a pack of fools that he begged their pardon for not letting them make a public show of him? If anything so outrageously absurd as this was really to be done, it could not be done that day, at any rate. He had promised to go back to the charming Milroy at the cottage, and to take Midwinter with him. What earthly need had he of the good opinion of the resident gentry? The only friends he wanted were the friends he had got already. Let the whole neighborhood turn its back on him if it liked, back or face. The Squire of Thorpe Ambrose didn't care two straws about it. After allowing him to run on in this way until his whole stock of objections was exhausted, Midwinter wisely tried his personal influence next. He took Allan affectionately by the hand. "I'm going to ask a great favor," he said. "If you won't call on these people for your own sake, will you call on them to please me?" Allan delivered himself of a